Hello and welcome to another episode of Monday Rewind. I'm being joined by Jacob over here, who's got the inside scoop on what happened over the weekend. And we'll also talk about the bounding articles that came out on Friday and early today on Monday to explain some hocus pocus that's going on with Madam Web.
Yeah, you can definitely call that hocus pocus. I would just call it tomfoolery, but there's some other words I can use to it too. But then again, we in our YouTube, and I'm
We're
not
on
a normal
YouTube, not
channel,
Rumble.
so
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So got to save that hard R for another time, unfortunately.
But like we have the title here mentioned, we do have the Book of Clarence review that you put out there that apparently lit well, quite a few people's butts on fire.
Yeah, and actually, if I can pull this up here because this is it's
Sure.
been blowing up on the Bounding channel and it's been blowing up on my channel too. So you notice kind of a theme here. So let's kind of rewind here just for a second. A few weeks ago, I think it's actually been about a week and a half now since this movie officially came out. And yeah, that is not any error that you're seeing on your screen right now. It's been out for a week and a half, and it's only made $4.6 million at the box office. And keep in mind, looking right there, it says that this has been out in 2,000 theaters since then. So it's got a pretty sizable outreach compared to other small budget films, and still nobody's watching it. Now, when you compound this with the fact that this film has a production budget of $40 million, which means that its break even is somewhere, let's say 100 ish, somewhere like 100, 150 ish. This is going to be nowhere near a box office success for, I believe this is Sony Pictures. Yeah, Sony Pictures here that did this film. So it's an absolute flop. And the marketing of this film was very deceptive, to say the least, because you see the trailer for this film and you think to yourself, oh, okay, well, this is a Christian movie, maybe they're playing up some of the comedy aspects of it. And honestly, this is something way far more sinister than just a comedy film or a Christian film specifically. Most of you guys know that Jay-Z is actually one of the producers of this film. He was a big financial backer for this movie, and him and Jeymes Samuel, who's the guy who produced, wrote, and directed this movie, all come from an ideology from literally a cult known as the 5% Nation. Now, some of you guys might not know what the 5% Nation is, but if you go to any comments regarding this film anywhere, there's a lot of people arguing about the beliefs of the 5% Nation. The best way that I can describe this is that this is an offshoot of the Nation of Islam, which is somehow even crazier than the Nation of Islam. These are people who believe quite literally that the black man is God, the white man is the devil. Believes in a lot of occult. It's basically like occultism, Islam, and black nationalism all poured into one. And it's the ideology that, the 5%ers are the ones who are enlightened to the truth of of black nature. The 10% are the oppressors, and then the 85% are the intentionally blind people. So this is all mixed into this film. And when you look at this movie, there's a lot of really dastardly tactics and beliefs that this film pushes upon its audience. It really tries to subvert people, which if you look at, the founding of the Nation of Islam, their very existence was trying to subvert the black church away from Christianity to their cult. And this film is very similar to their tactics here. Now, like I said, as you can tell from the numbers here, nobody bought into this. Only what, $4.6 million in a week and a half, $40 million budget. This is going to lose a massive amount of money. However, the believers of this cult are going out there, and essentially they're the people who I like to call permanently online. You know, those permanently online people who, if you say anything negative about their cult, there's always like 40 of them swarming like every single video.
Correct.
If
Yeah.
only if only they went to watch the movie, this probably would have made a lot more. But no, that doesn't exist here. But
No,
um,
no, no.
yeah, so they've
Was
been going.
this woke? We have a question for some. Was this woke? Hmm.
I have a saying that I like to say. It's so woke, it's almost asleep. That's how woke this film is. It's like they went full circle with the woke here. Like I said, it's a film drenched in black nationalism, cultism, and all kinds of just wacky beliefs. And these people have been going around essentially attacking anyone criticizing this movie, especially if you're white or especially if you're a black person who does believe in the cult aspects of this religion here. And they've just been going absolutely nuts over the last few days. I think our bounding review that is still up at the moment, I think has about 60 comments from very angry, unhappy people who didn't like my review, my take of this film. I think mine's probably has up to 100 now, the last time I checked as well. So
Jeez.
yeah, so these
Guess we know
people,
who's on minds. Hmm.
Oh yeah, right. So yeah, these people are not taking it very well. That this film absolutely flopped and was a complete and utter disaster at the box office. And this is exactly what it is. You tried to subvert people and you utterly failed. And guess what? Your film kind of deserves to fail at the end of the day. So I don't really have much sympathy for you here. But just a quick little rundown and review, I guess, of this film, just in case you hadn't seen the video version of this. This whole film is about a character called Clarence. Now, Clarence is not a name that is taken by coincidence. Clarence is the name of the founder of the 5% Nation of Islam, who taught black people in Harlem that black people can become gods. And in order to stem for his beliefs, he renamed himself Clarence Allah, aka Allah the Father, which means that he was literally referring to himself as God the Father, the creator of all things. This is how demented this guy is, and this is our main character of the story, played by Steinfeld here. And his whole thing is that this is Jerusalem in 33 AD, and he is a drug dealer in a majority black Jerusalem here. So in an attempt to be more relatable to the black audience, what does the black audience identify with? Drug dealing and hustling. So this is what they decided to base their main character around. It's an idea that's so racist that if a white guy wrote this movie, you would call him racist for making this film. But nope, it was actually a black guy trying to be identifiable with his people. And this is what we got here. And the whole premise of this is that he's jealous of Jesus, who of course is black in the movie. So he decides to con the people by telling them that he is the Messiah, that he becomes a false prophet so that the
Black
people...
Jesus is in this movie?
Black Jesus is in this movie. We have a
Wow.
black Jesus. Yep.
Adult Swim, way to go.
I think maybe the actor maybe be in this film too. Who knows?
That would be hilarious if that's who's under that hood. I would laugh so hard if that
Oh
actor's
yeah,
under that hood.
it probably could have redeemed the movie if they actually wanted to be a comedic, but they're not even smart enough to
Right.
do
Like
that.
Terry Crews is under the hood and he's like, nah, man, it's the force. You know, he's you know, it's all
Oh man.
these aren't the prophecies you're looking for.
Yeah, instead of turning water into wine, just turn water into Hennessy. Like, there's a lot of jokes there if you wanted to go that route. Like,
exactly.
I mean,
this could have been Life of Brian for the black folk, man. But nope.
Yeah, but nope. They decided to do something completely stupid. This is the best way that I can start it while I'm here on YouTube. But like I said, so his idea is that he's going to scam the people to giving them money so he can pay off his gambling debts. And it's only about halfway in the movie that he realizes that he's wrong, and he reaches a state of black awakening, because this is the belief in the 5% Nation. Once a black man realizes his own divinity, that he can become God himself. And towards the last 15 minutes of this movie, it completely perverts away from the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the death, burial, and resurrection. And instead of Jesus being the one on the cross, it's Clarence is the one who goes on the cross, dies, and then is resurrected in 3 days. And then on top of all that, I know that sounds crazy here, but our good buddy Benedict Cumberbatch is in this film, aka Doctor Strange, and he plays the white Jesus in the film. Essentially, he's a stand-in for the white Jesus white Jesus Christ. And towards the end of the film, while they have him on the cross, instead of pleading for the sins of humanity like the real Jesus did, he pretty much damns all of humanity, saying that he wishes God will kill everyone because everyone is terrible. And this is the representation in the eyes of the creators of this film of the white Jesus Christ. So they went out of their way to mock white Jesus in order to prop up Clarence, the cult leader from the 1970s who led so many people astray in New York. So yeah, this is the type of film that got released here. Now, maybe some people got wise that this is what they were trying to do, and people are like, I don't trust this film. Jay-Z's behind it, and we all know all the allegations behind Jay-Z. It's like, yeah, I don't trust you guys with a Christian story, and they stayed away from this. So big flop. Sony's going to lose a lot of money from this, and everyone deserves to lose all the way around. So
yep.
Oh, and by the way, James McAvoy is also in this movie. He's playing the Romans, the white Romans. Because, of course, when in Jerusalem where everyone's black, you, of course, have to keep the Romans white because everyone knows that they're the bad guys in the story. So,
well, it would be hilarious if you made them all Indian with the thick accents, too. The Bollywood accents.
And I don't know, maybe they didn't go well with the whole Echo release, which we talked about a little bit earlier,
sure.
too. But we'll hop back around in that one because there was a story about Taylor Sheridan.
That's a nice pun. That's a nice pun.
Hey, sometimes they just come to me. It's like, no,
that was a stealthy one, dude. You got the color purple, though.
Oh, speaking of other box office flop, this is another subversive box office flop. This one actually came from our good buddies at Warner Brothers, who we all know there's somebody who needs money right now. It's certainly Warner Brothers, and this is definitely not helping. This is a film that had a production budget of $100 million, allegedly, and it's only made $60 million, and the film's been out since Christmas. So this
Christmas.
is a month's worth of box office total here, and it's only got it hasn't even made back like 60% of its production budget in a month. So this one's now being pulled off of movie theaters. It's already going straight to digital and Max and all that. So it's like, yeah, it's one of those films where if you see a movie that's like, oh, available in digital like 2 weeks after it released, that means the studio desperately needs its money back and then trying to strike when the iron's hot. This is essentially what's happening here. And look, we all saw Barbie. We all saw the film and what they were trying to do with the Barbie movie. And I said in my best and worst of 2023 list that if Barbie was the flag bearer for white girl feminism, that this is the flag bearer for black girl feminism. And this is everything that this film is. This is a 2.5 hour film that is about a woman who every single man she has ever known in her entire life is absolutely horrible. She was given away by her birth father to another guy who treated her poorly. And then that guy ended up giving her away in marriage to another sexual abuser who basically physically and sexually beat her every single time that he got an opportunity, treated her like dirt for 20 years, kept her away from her sister, all these terrible, horrible things.
A
The only
Lifetime movie.
Yeah, it's Lifetime on steroids. Everyone in her life is bad, and the only redeemable people in her life are the women. So it's literally men bad, women good. It even goes to so far to, I guess, tease a little bit of lesbianism in here as well. Because why not? Why wouldn't you tease that as well if all the men are bad? But this is what I mean about storytelling in modern storytelling in Hollywood, because the idea here is that we need young black girls to adopt the ideals of feminism through a quasi musical here. And the only way that we can essentially create our or essentially mold our ideology is that every single man in the film needs to be terrible, because if there's one good man, one redeemable man in the entire film, that means the message completely dies. Because if you're telling everyone that men are bad but there's one good man in there, that means that, oh, there's hope that there actually is good men out there. We can't have people have that takeaway. So it's like, nope, everyone's just going to be absolutely horrible.
Yep.
And this is how Hollywood thinks they're going to propagize their films to the modern audience. Go ahead.
No, this is nuts. I'm just showing you the gifts here of some of the stuff that went on in it. This isn't like crazy off the wall stuff, but one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that annoys me about a lot of modern black cinema is that they want to go back to this time period when they were either enslaved or put upon or segregated or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But it implies that they go back and they talk like this with like that cartoonish broken English that like
Yep.
everybody made fun of in like those old racist cartoons and the old racist propaganda that used to go around telling you everybody's dumb who's not white, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That I just find it really annoying that when it comes to championing the black cause, all that there is to do is just this stuff right here that walks you back into a previous century where these people are not protagonists. They're not speaking like protagonists. They're out here speaking like these caricatures that
Yeah.
otherwise would exist in like one of those Bell Brooks comedy movies about the situation. Like we watched Blazing
It's
Saddles. This is how
Yep.
the slaves talk to each other as a comedic act.
It's done intentionally, and here's why. Because there's this big push, and I talked about it with our first movie, The 5% Nation. There's this big push to keep black people in the mindset that it's still the 1800s, and they're still it's still like 1800, like Selma, like, you know what I mean? It's like they're still in that mindset here, and this is the imagery that we push. So every time we do a black story, it always has to be about oppression and slavery and about being beaten down and tried. It's all feel bad stories. And this is essentially why I guess you can argue that race relations are so bad, or where it's at the point that it is now, is because they always have to tell people, "Oh, well, you were slaves, and they enslaved your ancestors," and blah blah blah. Then you have people like LeVar Burton, who goes on television and finds out that actually your ancestors actually were the slave owners. Your ancestors actually were the Confederate soldiers. So I know you've been telling you for all this time that yeah, you were slaves and blah blah blah, and you were so oppressed, and then come to find out, no, actually your ancestors are white and they were Confederate soldiers. So, oopsie daisy. Yeah, those reparations are gonna get really awkward now. So,
Yeah, second, we do have that screenshot of LeVar Burton from TMZ, real finding out in this very moment that one of his ancestors was a Confederate soldier. There it is. There's the face you
mm,
make when you find out that your great 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 something or other was in on it.
keep in mind,
So
Lamar Burton, just in case you haven't or didn't know, was in a very, I guess you could say, iconic for Black people mini series called Roots, and obviously Roots was another mini series back in the '70s that was all about slavery and how the way blacks were treated and whatnot. So he has a very iconic character called Toby or Kunta Kinte, and he was all about, you know, a slave trying to overcome being in colonial America and all of that. So this is a guy who's been very, very fond with slavery propaganda for many, many years, and they come to find out that he's actually related to Confederate ancestors. Just owes a little extra oomph of hilarity to it when it's all said and done.
the
Yeah.
comments are pretty good. You got Aze Bay here saying Burton felt his race card go from platinum to bronze. And then
And
Kunta Bentobi this whole time. It
yep.
comes from the Grimm's streaker. So
Yeah, so like I said, it's just one of these propaganda films after another, just absolutely just dying at the vine on the box office here. And like I said, they absolutely deserve it. This is their own fault, and you know, a lot of people don't like hearing that. A lot of people don't like hearing that. You know, oh well. I think it has more to do with the fact that these people, because it's black movies, quote unquote, they attach themselves to these films, so they feel like they have an added incentive for these movies to succeed. And it's like, look, if a movie's like crappy, like just let it be absolutely crap fest. You don't have to emotionally attach yourself to the story. And this is something we kind of talk about with even comic books and writing, how people always have to self-insert themselves into these stories. So it's like, well, this is successful. If this is successful, then I'm not successful because this is basically about me. It's like, you guys need to stop doing this because you're going to be into a lot of depressions and bad news as time goes on here. This is going to be the state of what you're doing here. So a couple
it
other
seems we
notes
have a
here.
running theme though. It seems we have a running theme between these two movies. It's like you said, to keep black people down, but also to make sure
Mhm.
that white people feel that they can't have a conversation about this.
Yeah, right. Because, like I said, just to go and look at the comments of some of our videos regarding some of these films here, and they'll pretty much tell you all the story that you need. And yeah, I know the media. You watch CNN, and they'll tell you that, oh, it's the Trump supporters, it's Patriot Front that are the most racist people. It's like, no, I don't think that's the case. Based on some of the stuff that we've gotten here. Then they called Candyman black horror for white people, and I stopped listening. Just real quick before I go on to this, anyone about you, if you remember the 2021 Candyman film that came out a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
that was the one that was being produced by Jordan Peele. Did essentially the exact same thing, where they took Candyman, this horror legend from like the 80s or the 90s, whenever that film came out, and they remade it. But they remade it for a modern lens, and what they did was that they essentially turned Candyman into a black superhero where he only exclusively kills white people throughout the entire film. And it's not even like white people who have really done like anything wrong. In the eyes of the film, the villain is gentrification. So the villain is white people moving to what was historically black neighborhoods and upping the value. Like, anyone who knows Chicago and has heard the name Cabrini Green knows that that housing project was notorious for all kinds of atrocities and violence and whatever the case may be. And it got torn down. Like, it was so bad they literally tore it down, and I think they ended up building like a Walmart and a bunch of other like things on top of it. So a normal person will look like that. It's like, oh yeah, great, a place that was notorious for horrific events has been torn down, and now the neighborhood's better. They look at it from, oh, you tore down our black history, and so white people can move in and make it comfortable for them. So what does the film do? We're just gonna go around and kill white people for minor inconveniences because this is a black superhero movie. That's what we have to do with every black superhero movie. White people have to be the enemy, right?
Apparently, right?
It's like with Black Panther, with everyone idolized Killmonger because Killmonger wanted to start a global race war and use Wakanda weapons to overtake the colonizers, and everyone's all like, "Yeah, yeah, this is great." And it's like, wait, he just said he wanted to start a race war and kill innocent children. You guys think that this is a good thing? It's like when you're in that mindset that you think, oh, they're the good guys in this scenario, you may be a little bit deranged. That's all I'm
Just a
saying.
smidge. Just a smidge. I mean, Thanos had like an argument, not like a
Mm-hmm.
logical one, but he had an argument that like the resources of the universe would be outmatched by the life existing inside of it. And so that made sense,
He
but
had a motivation that wasn't, I
right.
just want everyone to die.
Right, and that's what Killmonger's thing was, is that apparently he saw too much war and decided more war was better. And
Yep.
here we go. But
Yep. So,
on the other end of that coin,
yeah. So here we have a couple of movies that are being successful here in the box office right now. Anyone But You, which I didn't give a positive review to. It's not, I wouldn't call it terrible, like it's one of the worst films of the year, but it's just not a very good film. But it is one of the few rom-com movies that we have, and I criticized it for not being very romantic and not being very funny. But as you can see here, there's such a desperation for rom-coms these days because everything is so perverted as far as like love goes. Hollywood doesn't know how to make a love story because they don't know what love is. Like they pervert lust into being love. So when you're actually trying to do a rom com that inspires people, you do it like poorly. Like even in this film, to be completely honest with you, this whole film is about Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney, who are our two leads here. But it's basically their drama revolving around a gay wedding. So it's like while the gay wedding's happening, they're trying to like find like love of one another, and it just doesn't click because the focus isn't really on them as the story like goes on here. But if you watch the trailers, you think that, oh, look at this is going to be two good-looking leads who have amazing chemistry. The trailer makes it look better than what it actually is. But like I said, there is a thirst out there for rom-coms, and this film passed $100 million with a $25 million budget, so it is going to be a box
wow.
office success. So they will make some money off of this one at least. So I guess that's one positive that you can spin here. And then just wrap up our rundown real quick. The other two movies here is the Mean Girls remake. This is the based on the musical for Mean Girls. This one is now like what $66 million at the box office after a couple of weeks. Now I have heard a common complaint regarding this, the fact that people didn't know that this was a musical when they actually went to go watch the movie, so it was kind of a surprise. Like, oh wait, this is a music. They thought it was just a remake, and turned out nope, we have songs in here and whatnot. And that was kind of like a negative that most people had because apparently people aren't too fond of musicals these days. But it's making money. There's still somewhat nostalgia tied to the name. $66 million on a $36 million budget, so it's probably going to be profitable by the time its run is completely done here. So this one, if you're a fan of the 2004 Mean Girls, maybe you'll go like this one. If not, I don't see any reason why you would like it. And then the final one here is The Beekeeper, the Jason Statham movie. And I did get a little pushback on our review for this because I said in the review that Jason Statham is probably the last action star in Hollywood, or one of the last ones. And the people tried to say, well, what about Tom Cruise? And I was like, well, Tom Cruise has Mission Impossible, but he's not exactly what I would call like an action star. It's like he's not like a name that you would like throw on just any old kind of like B movie and put Cruise like on the top of it, like the way that we used to do with like certain guys. Jason Statham is like legitimately like an action star. Like people want to see him like punch and kick and throw people through windows and stuff. Like with Tom Cruise, you really just want to see him like jump off of like the highest building or bridge and stuff like that. So it's not really the same lane. But
Should have
this
made
one,
him Spider-Man.
yeah, I mean, imagine that one. Oh, I mean, hey, Secret Wars is coming out, and they've always talked about bringing him in, so might as well have
Still
him be,
time. Old man Spider-Man.
or old man Tony Stark. They can do that one too. It's alternate
Superior, right?
universe.
That's what they're gonna do with him. They were gonna make him the superior Iron Man, right? Yeah.
Yep. That's what happens when you run out of ideas. But this one has $75 million at the box office, similar budget to the last film. So, like I said, these two movies look like they're going to make box office money here. So, this is kind of the update that we have here. And I guess the moral of this story here is that just make movies that people want to enjoy. They don't want the propaganda. They don't want to feel bad for 2.5 hours. I mean, if at least you're going to do feel bad movies, make it like 90 minutes so people can get in and get out. Don't hold them hostage for 2.5 hours and then wondering why you guys are losing $100+ million at the box office. So,
And
um, I can shoot this one over to you here. I guess, was rom coms ever funny? It depends. They're very, very hit and miss. If you don't have chemistry with the leads, they die on the vine. So, I mean, what about you?
I really liked 51st Dates. That was probably the last like rom-com that I
Hmm.
enjoyed. I like romantic movies like Age of Adeline was a lot of fun for me. I really enjoyed that plot. That was I think it was one of the last legitimate romance movies, last legitimate movies that what's her face there starred in. But
Uh,
rom-coms,
Barrymore wasn't Barrymore?
no, no, it was the one that Ryan Reynolds' day is married to.
Oh, Blake
Starts with a
Lively.
yeah, Blake. Yeah, that was good. That was a really well done romance. It was straight romance. There wasn't any comedy in it. What's his face there? Harrison Ford was in it. Um, but yeah, as far
Ooh,
as rom
yeah, yeah.
coms go, the last one that I enjoyed was 50 First Dates. That was actually funny. I actually did laugh a lot during that movie. So that was a long time ago, dude. I it was back when I was just like getting my license and stuff when that came out. I think so.
Yeah. So before you knew any better, essentially, right?
It's true. Before we knew what Adam Sandler was really capable of.
Yes. People hadn't gotten sick and tired of him at that point yet. Like Jack and Jill hadn't came out. Like That's My Boy hadn't came out. And it was like that was the rough patch of like Sandler films. And
What was
it's
that one that beat out Pacific Rim about the old dads? It was just dads?
oh, Grown Ups.
Grown Ups, yeah, and then Grown Ups
Yeah.
2 came out, and we were like, "What the heck? What is this now?"
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird that Adam Sandler has somewhat of a renaissance here over the last few years because now he's actually not doing comedy movies. So he's done like Uncut Gems, he's done Hustle, and it's like when he's actually passionate about like the subject matter and it's like not a comedy, he's still actually a pretty good actor. He plays the roles pretty well, but when he does like, oh, let's get David Spade and Kevin James together and do another movie, that's when everyone's like, okay, I don't need to see this. So
Bye. Yeah.
it's like call me
Well,
later.
the thing that we that got me about Adam Sandler's comedy style was that it just basically it peaked in the 90s and it never evolved. And that kind of like it beat the tar out of the movies that he made. So he ended
Yeah.
up with this repetitive ensemble cast that gave him some kind of juice and they were all 90s people, SNL dropouts most of them and that was really all it was. I mean, I feel bad for Rob Schneider. A great deal of his last days making movies were wrapped around Adam Sandler's wild ideas. So,
Hmm. But I mean, the way that I looked at his films, just real quick, the way that I looked at his films, it was like Sony was basically giving him like a $40 million budget every single film that he did, just for like, okay, your friends go out to like Hawaii or some kind of tropical location and film a movie and come back in like 6 months. And he was like, well, if they're gonna pay us to go on vacation, so you might as well, right? So on that level, it's like I kind of respect the hustle. I mean, if they're just gonna keep giving you money, then yeah, why not just make the same dumb crap over and over again? It's like, what do you care? All right, then now we're here to Paramount Global bracing for a new round of layoffs. So the state of media right now is just not good. And I can't say that it's all based on where media has gone over the last 10 years, because if you really look back on some of these companies have been essentially kicking the can of their debt and their folly now for like 3 decades. Like a good example of this is Warner Brothers, obviously, right? Warner Brothers sold back in 2001 at the whole Time Warner AOL deal, and they were obviously losing money there. That's why they sold in the first place. So they sold everything to Warner, and then Warner over the course of the next decade sold everything to AT&T, and AT&T took up all of the debt and took up all of the I guess the baggage of that sale. That didn't last very long. So here we have a few years later, oh, we're going to sell everything to Discovery. So they're going to kick the can now. And then, oh, okay, well, Discovery is losing $45 billion a year. They're in massive debt. So who's next? Oh, Paramount. Do you want to buy this whole thing? Well, apparently Paramount has their own money troubles
yeah.
at the moment here too. Like I said, Paramount, who, keep in mind, it wasn't even that long ago. I'm not sure if you remember this. It wasn't even that long ago where Paramount was called Viacom. And Viacom, like 20 years ago, was like basically what Disney is now. Like they were like the media giant. They owned Nickelodeon, MTV, the movie studios. Like they
Comedy
had
Central.
Comedy Central, VH1. It's like they had control of like all of the big properties, and everyone thought that that they were essentially going to be the media conglomerate that were never going to go down. And here we are, all these years later, and everything is just bad on their end. I'll speculate this here in a second, but basically saying that Paramount Global is proceeding a new wave of staff reductions in February. Here, the cuts will be hundreds of employees across the entire company. For the past several days, there were chatters about layoffs, about 800. Now they're expecting it could be a little bit more than that, from what I heard in an updated report. But it follows the Wall Street Journal back in December saying that the company was mulling the total elimination of 1,000 jobs in early 2024. The rein in costs. Sources say that the extent of the cost will not be quite as big as the layoffs be in the hundreds, but targeting virtually every division. Senior executives begin reduction targets hit as well, so they're going to be making less money as well. Layoffs here implemented in January. No one's commenting. Things are in flux, but February 13th is when the rumor target date that this thing is going to go. So we'll find out here in just a couple of weeks just how bad this whole thing is going to be. But if Deadline and all these major outlets are reporting on it, it sounds like it's going to be pretty bad. Thinking about Paramount's already gone through multiple cuts over the last 14 months. And it's not looking much better here. Now, there's a multi-layered issue here with Paramount specifically. And with Paramount, if you look at, like I said, their main networks, you're talking about like Comedy Central, you're talking about MTV, you're talking about Nickelodeon. These were all networks that 20 years ago were kind of at their height as far as like content and viewership goes. Like who wasn't watching Comedy Central 20 years ago? Who wasn't watching Nickelodeon and MTV and all these networks? Now, over the last 10 years specifically, the content that those networks used to have all fallen in the toilet. Like I used to travel a lot to like the last like year and a half or so. Every time I would go to a hotel and turn on MTV during the weekend, guess what was playing? Ridiculousness for 48 consecutive hours. That's all they were playing over and over and over again. That's all they have. And you talk about where MTV was and where it is now. This is part of the reason why they're losing so much money. They don't have content to provide their customers. South Park is basically the only reason anyone is still watching Comedy Central in 2024. And there's only so much South Park can do to keep this whole thing afloat, especially when you're paying Trey and Matt so much money to keep the show on the network. You don't really have anything else to spread out anywhere else. So like a few years ago when they acquired all of these networks, they acquired VH1, MTV, Nickelodeon, and whatnot. It was like a conglomerate. Now they just have like so many empty networks. They don't know what to do with any of this stuff. It's like, why do we need a vice president and a VH1? What was the last show you watched on VH1? Like I haven't watched VH1 since Pop-Up Video. You know how long Pop-Up Video was? That was like 1990 something. That's how long that show was.
Surreal Life was on MTV too, right?
Surreal Life was VH1 as well.
VH1. So I did watch one show on there. I only watched 2 episodes of it, and that was when Flavor Flav was trying to get with that tall lady, and that was it.
Oh, and another thing, somebody mentioned BET is another one that they have on here. So
Yes.
it's also gotten so bad that like for their big events, like let's say a football games or like the Video Music Awards, something like that, they'll now simulcast that award show or that game on like several different networks at once because they're so low on content. They literally need any excuse for anyone to watch. So they'll play the MTV Awards on 5 different networks that Paramount owns just so they can get up the viewership numbers and somehow still only get like 2.5 million people to watch throughout 5 networks. So that's how like bad they're doing right now. And another thing that really hurt Paramount is the fact that they decided a couple years ago with COVID, it was like, well, we're just gonna move everything to streaming because no one's leaving their homes anymore because everyone's too scared. So everyone's gonna go put everything on a streaming service and we'll recoup all of our money. And they found out very quickly that that wasn't gonna work because all of these companies that went all in on streaming over the last few years, Paramount, Disney, Warner, they're all losing tons and tons of money because the overhead of running your own streaming service and running it to a level where it's actually satisfactory for its customers is way more expensive than they thought, and they're not getting the return on their investment that they thought that it was. That's why all of these streaming services are jacking up their rates like almost like every 3 months now, because it's like, oh, we're going to give you this for like $7.99, and next thing you know, it's like, oh crap, we're losing money. $10.99, oh crap, $14.99. Now some of these people are talking about like $20 a month for like Paramount.
With
You're
ads.
With ads, right? If you don't want ads, it's going to cost you even more. And everyone's like, okay, well, there's not enough on here to justify me paying this amount, so I'm just not going to do it now. So what you have here is a series of media giants that are struggling with content because they don't know what their audience, I don't say they don't know what their audience wants, they just don't want to give it to them. But one way or another, they're not putting anything out on television or on streaming service that people actually want to watch. And all of these media corporations are just like teetering right now. So if one little domino falls, one little stack of the cards fall, this whole thing is going to go down. It's going to be bad for the entire industry. But giving what these media companies have been giving us as far as films and TV shows and all this other stuff over the last few years, I can't say I feel bad for him. If anything, you probably deserve this. What do you think about the fall of Paramount here?
Well, this is what I've been thinking about for a while now, that the biggest mistake that they made by going all in on the streaming stuff is not shutting off the TV end of it. The streaming should have been the central choke point for all of their content, meaning there should have been
Hmm.
one producer at the top of like each show, and everything reports to the master Paramount Plus or Paramount Interactive, whatever the hell their platform is. That's what it was supposed to like exist as a it should have anyway. Like Disney should have shut off the Disney Channel. They should have. They should have just bang. Because what find me a home in America with a child under the age of 10 that doesn't have a smart television in 2024. Find me a home in America that doesn't have one. They're extremely rare that you have a child and you don't have a smart TV. And that's just how it
Hmm.
works now. That's an all-purpose. That's an all-purpose. Yeah, it's an all-purpose entertainment station at that point. But this way, you can access multiple streaming services. Now, compounding this problem is, as you said, maintaining the amount of content coming through. So it wouldn't be enough if Paramount sat down and said, "We're going to make our own streaming service. We're dumping all the television stations we have into this. We're not putting TV out anymore. We're only doing streaming content." That's still not enough content for them to be able to generate enough in a year for people who want to watch television all day. That's
Yeah.
not enough content for that. Even if they dump their movie library in there, that's not a year's worth of watching content. Maybe six
Hmm.
months. That's about it. So what they should have done is they should have dumped this all into Netflix. Honestly, they should have sat down with Netflix, carved out a contract that there were like special sections in Netflix dedicated to each of these studios. You could go to the Nickelodeon studio section of Netflix and it's exclusively Nickelodeon programming. You go to the Simpsons, you can get down into the shows if you wanted to. You go to the Simpsons end of Netflix and it's just Simpsons related content. This is what they should have done. They should have hammered out their licenses that way and made it all happen through Netflix. And granted, yes, Netflix would be the central hub to it, but you would not be chucking out $140 for streaming services. They half ass everything and they're going to collapse anyway, leaving all the entertainment they created for you unfinished.
Yep. Not to mention, like with Paramount, there's still like a whole horde of old television shows from multiple networks they don't even have on Paramount because, dirty little secret, they actually don't have the rights to those shows. So a good
Right.
example of this would be TRL, right? Like TRL was like a big show for MTV like almost 30 years ago, going back. They don't have TRL on Paramount Plus, and the reason why is because they don't have the rights to use any of the music that was used on that TRL show. If they wanted it on Paramount Plus, they would have to pay every single artist who ever appeared on that show over the course of 10 years it was on the air, and they don't want to do that. So they'll completely remove that stuff off Paramount Plus entirely because they don't want to shell out that money, which they clearly don't have to begin with. So there's even like a dark web iceberg level of content that from like years ago that you still can't get access to here because they don't want to shell out the money to give it to you. So it was what I mentioned this with Disney not too long ago. Disney has a little show called The Jersey that was a very popular show in the late 90s. It's still not on Disney Plus. Reason why is because, well, we had a lot of sports stars and we used a lot of likenesses from sports teams during that time period. So if we put it on our network, we're going to have to pay out those sports franchises and we're not paying them any money. So guess what? Show's not going to be on the air. Get effed. Like, that's essentially
Yeah.
what we have here.
Here's another hitch in the giddy up, right? Hasbro bought Power Rangers from Disney. Disney put a lot of money into that franchise, a lot of money into that franchise, arguably propelled it up to its height in the mid 2000s to its ultimate collapse here in the 2010s. But now Hasbro's not going to be making any more of that. They don't have the
Hmm.
money. They're laying people off left and right. And most of the people who got left off left the Power Rangers division. So the new guy that runs this does not want any, the new CEO does not want anything to do with the Power Rangers brand, finds it useless. So now Disney right? And I know that they put the Mystic Force Rangers in their parade at Disney, at Disneyland at least. I've seen that in many, many years in their parades.
Mhm.
So Disney is now strapped, right? You have a nostalgia bait giant like Power Rangers that they couldn't figure out how to market to children back in the day, right? That
Yeah.
meanwhile has this massive adult audience that buys all these crazy toys about it. I don't have any Power Rangers memorabilia. I think I have like one VHS tape left that didn't rot away. So it's
Mhm.
just not my thing to own the toys. I like the lore. But there's
Yeah.
a lot of people that like that Lightning collection and stuff like that. Apparently, it's not enough for Hasbro. They're just completely scrapping that. So now, again, like I just reiterated, Disney has this giant of nostalgia that's just going to fade away on Netflix. It's just going to get memory hold in the Netflix corner with all the other stuff that people remember from the 90s, and that's it. And
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like how many other things? Like you remember Team Knight Rider? I don't see that
Yeah.
anywhere on streaming. You got to go on YouTube to even know anything that even existed. Team Knight Rider.
Yeah. And it's weird because before this story came out, before the rumors of the financial downfall of Paramount, just a few weeks ago, there was talking about possibly merging Paramount with Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers still has billions of dollars of debt that they're holding on to. This debt that's literally been around since Ted Turner owned this property, and they were like, okay, who can we sell this to? Comcast, you want to buy this? So they were talking about merging with Paramount a few weeks back. And I'm thinking to myself, so here you have Paramount, who's clearly broke and needs money, and you have Warner Brothers, who's clearly broke and needs money. They're gonna merge, lay off a whole bunch of people, still be about $40 billion in debt, and have to realize, okay, well now we have to sell to somebody else. And what you're seeing here, this is essentially what entertainment has become over the last 40 years, I would say. I mentioned this so many times, but I bring it up here because it's still relevant. We used to have about 31 companies, 31 production companies creating all of the content you would see on television and on movies, right? So you had 31 small production, where it was New Line Cinema, where it was like all of these like little small production companies, and they would do quality content, right? Because they actually ran their business like a studio would run its business. What's happened is that these major corporations have come in and they've swallowed up all the studios, but they're not running their business like a studio because they have all this other business on the side here that they're making money off of. So it's like, oh, if this thing loses $40 billion, that's no problem because we still have the theme parks and we still have this and that. And now we've gotten to a point where that's not cutting it anymore. And everyone's looking around. It's like, okay, who do I sell this to so I can get out of here? And everyone's looking around. It's like, oh, you're losing money, Disney. You're losing money, Warner Brothers. You're losing money, Paramount. Comcast. You have money? No. Who are we gonna sell this to? Apple. I mean, it's very real
Well,
possibility that we could be in a situation here where a duopoly, where one or two companies control everything because they're the only ones who have money, is a very real possibility.
well, and like as Rhaegar Targaryen points out here, 31 companies like Baskin Robbins, yeah, but all the flavors are like sweaty shoe insert.
Yeah,
So
but I mean,
that's what you're looking at with your duopoly, right? Is that when you compound BlackRock and Vanguard on top of this, the people that are in the control of this DEI nonsense that's
yeah.
created this mess, arguably. I would say before this they were in bad news. This has only made it worse, right? So
A lot.
this whole thing, right? You compound that in there, it's not gonna get better. The only thing it means is that there will be much less experimentation and much less deviation in the content you get.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's not getting any better here. Basically, all of these companies are trying to desperately find a way to kick the can of debt to somebody else so they can pretend like or have the allure of, oh, we're actually successful and not, drowning in money when everyone here is clearly drowning. And someone's looking for like this golden like life server to just toss it into the water so they can grab it and get pulled out. It's not coming. I don't know what to tell you. It's like everyone's thinking, oh, Apple's just sitting in the wait, seeing who they can buy. Apple doesn't need to make a move right now because if they see that the entire thing is falling right now, why would they go in and save everyone? They can just wait for the whole thing to crash and then pick up the pieces. So they can just wait back on their giant stock of money right now and just see who crashes first.
Right. And I've been, it's the same question I've been asking about this geopolitical thing as we're watching BlackRock tumble because of the problems going on with the Chinese economy that have compounded into the US economy now.
Mm-hmm.
BlackRock announced last year that they're liquidating their assets in the US market and leaving. So don't know where to, but They that spells bad news for like Bob Iger and all these studio heads that have been relying on this endless money chain to fuel this agenda-driven content that keeps raining from from these platforms.
Yeah. So
So,
I don't know. Are these companies just gonna like outright die before they change course, or are they just gonna go down with the ship? I mean, who knows at this point? But um,
speaking of going down with the ship, though,
yeah, so this is our last story, and like I said, all of this is basically driven on the downfall of media. Because if you guys didn't know, we cast the 2-year mark of Frost's infamous rant on G4, which literally killed the revival in a matter of weeks. They revived G4 only for it to die very quickly here. But I want to go back just a little further here, because this will give you the full story of essentially what we've been talking about here in this entire show, and really what really truly led to the downfall of G4. So remember, I was talking about where the digital cable rise happened, and all of a sudden we had thousands of channels, which turned out to be a massive backfire in the long run. But obviously Tech TV was a network along with G4 back in 2002, and these two networks had, I don't want to say a similar audience, but it's like one was technically for like technology based things. This is like early 2000s, where tech information was actually pretty valuable during that time period, and early gaming stuff as well. Well, Tech TV had a bigger outreach by about 30 million viewers at the time than G4 did. So G4, which is owned by Comcast, the mega corporation at the time, they decided, hey, you know what, we're gonna buy Tech TV and grow the audience for G4. How much money did they spend? You said in 2004, as you can see here from this article, they spent a grand total of $300 million to buy Tech TV. And essentially what they bought was access to about 30 million more homes nationwide on digital cable. So this is what Comcast spent their money for back in 2004 to acquire this whole thing. So this is how this started. After acquiring Tech TV for about an 8-month period, they had this thing called G4 Tech TV, and it was essentially the merger between the two networks. And they took, the best content from G4, they took the best content from Tech TV, merged it into one company. And I'll say this: when you look back at, what that merger led to, they actually did have something kind of. If they had people in charge who really wanted to build upon it, they had something here. Now I'll go back to a retrospective that I wrote here a while back ago, going on this whole thing. And
I do
this is
want to
something that,
mention though, before we get
what?
too far away from it, Jacob, is that $300 million you're talking about that
Mm-hmm.
they paid for this? That's 500 million adjusted for inflation in 2023 dollars, not 2024.
Yeah. So essentially, the picture I'm trying to get you guys to understand here is that the investment, this is the amount of money that has gone into G4 throughout its entire lineage. So we started off with a $500 million investment into G4 back in 2004. How do we get here? Well, like I said, they bought Tech TV, they merged the networks for about 8 months. You had shows like Anime Unleashed, which was basically a show to introduce unknown anime shows to the US. Not a bad idea. You had Arena here, which was more of a like a esports type of thing before esports had really taken off. You had Cheat, obviously, back where cheat codes in gaming were still a thing. I know some of you guys might not remember that, but that was a thing once upon a time. Now they call it
Wow.
micro. Now they call it microtransactions.
Mm.
Cinematech, which was basically just like YouTube before YouTube. So you had that. Filter, which was basically a countdown show based on video game related stuff. You had techtv.com or g4tv.com, which is basically like a call-in interactive show back in the days where message boards was like still a big thing. So you had Robot Wars UK. If you guys remember Robot Wars, it was basically just robots fighting each other and throwing themselves in the fire. It was actually pretty cool. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's around still. They still have it.
yeah.
Or they did.
They think it's still on Discovery, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if it's
Yeah,
still
the
like
guy who did
active.
Red Dwarf hosts it, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the
The
main
guy,
show.
that guy, and what's his name, Kenny Florian, I think we're on it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
the screensavers here. Now, for those of you guys who are fans of G4 didn't know this, screensavers is actually the show that predated Attack of the Show. So when the merger happened, at the end of the merger, they took the screensavers, changed the entire format, and made it Attack of the Show. So this is the show that predated that one here. That was a big show. Unscrewed with Martin Sargent, basically it was like a late night comedy show that was on Tech TV at the time. And then of course the show that everyone remembers, X Play, which is actually a show that started on Tech TV TV, moved over to G4, and this is basically the lineup that you had. Now, for 2004, that's actually not a bad lineup of original stuff that you guys had on a network that was new and growing. What happened was is that 8 months after the merger, Comcast said, "Yeah, you know what? Really don't need none of this tech TV stuff anymore because all we really did was buy all this for the outreach for G4. So let's take all the stuff that we acquired, cancel it, and the only two shows that we're going to keep is Attack of the Show and X Play." So these were the only two shows that keep in mind they just spent $500 million on this, and they decided to kill this whole thing in 8 months. So this is all before G4, I guess, was at its height, I guess you can say. But obviously, a few years passes by, and Olivia Munn and Kevin Ferreira become big stars on Attack of the Show. X Play is still a big thing. This is towards like the late 2000s. However, the rest of the network nosedives because outside of those two shows, they had no other content. They started paying for syndicated shows. They were showing like cheaters and old episodes of Cops repeatedly, and people were like, "Okay, look, I already have to pay extra just to watch this network, and you guys have absolutely nothing for me here." It got so bad, DirecTV literally told G4 in 2009 that they were going to drop them from their coverage because they didn't see the value in G4. That was DirecTV speaking. That was like a press release. So that's how bad things have gotten. And a couple of years later, certain people got fired. Cesar. A couple other people left the company, and the whole thing goes belly up at about 2012. They end all of their shows. They stopped doing original programming, and the show was pulled off the air entirely. The network is pulled out of the air entirely in 2014. So this is all that happened before we got to the reboot of Tech TV G4 years later. So now all of a sudden we're going to revive this whole thing without answering the big elephant in the room. How are we going to get people to watch something in 2021 that they did not watch 7 years ago? And no one decided to answer that question. They just like, hey, let's just bring back X Play and Attack the Show again and bring in new people. So let's bring back Adam Sussler, literally the only person involved in X Play nobody likes anymore, and add in other unlikable people associated with that too. And guess what happens? 6 weeks into the revival, Frost goes on her rant and literally kills the revival before it even starts. So after spending countless amounts of money on overhead, on staffing, on executives, they like, if you guys didn't know, Issa Gundam did a video about this earlier. You can go check out his channel where he's kind of retelling what happened with the G4 revival. They literally revived it and brought back let's say they brought back enough personnel as if they were still on cable. Like they still had their own executive vice presidents, and they spent $200,000 a month on a studio. What they thought that they were still on like cable, and people were actually paying to see this, and they were essentially nothing more than a show that was on like YouTube and Twitch for that period of time. And nobody thought to think to ourselves, it's like, why are we putting in that much money and we're not even anywhere near our revenue budget? Well, you didn't hit your revenue budget, and that was the reason why Comcast pulled the plug on it. So on the second time in literally 7 years, G4 fails again. And I think if you put together all of the money that that Comcast sunk into G4, only for it to flop on two separate occasions, you're probably looking at an all-in total of roughly $600 million. And if you want to adjust that with inflation, good luck. This is literally the story of G4 throughout the course of the last 20 years. And like I said, we hit the 2-year anniversary of this whole thing. So this iconic image that killed G4 for a second time, and here we are. So like I said, I have a personal vendetta against Comcast based on G4 because I saw that there was potential there, but clearly they didn't have anyone in charge who knew what they were doing at any point of this whole thing. And now, like I said, distant memory, and you guys had something and you blew it. So,
well, and again, I mean, we saw this with like FX. FX had a really great lineup, and then they tried to merge it in with the regular Fox lineup with a little bit of edge, and it just the wheels fell off of it. FX just recently got into like having like edgy content again, but this edgy content is really more streaming suited, so it has to either be on really late or on the satellite. Yeah, of course on the satellite. Very limited audience, right? So and FX again is home to Always Sunny in Philadelphia, correct? Or am I getting the channel name wrong?
no,
FX,
always
right?
on yeah, FX, yeah.
Yeah. And again,
Yeah.
so this is the brand. This is where G4 should have seated themselves. They should have gone to another indie startup channel like FX, because arguably it was in the beginning an indie startup channel. Fox was very experimental with that in the beginning. The Breakfast Show, I think, was one of the most experimental ones on there. It's a great series. If you want to, Jacob, feel free to Google it after this. I really wish we could do something like this. I really wish we could.
Yeah, right.
But so this problem right here, though, is that G4 should have packed up and gone to like G4 with that. They should have said, like, we've got 5 shows that we can provide your network with, FX. What do you say? And then you have like a gaming block at like 8 o'clock to midnight every night on FX, or like the weeknights on FX, and weekends you have your movies or whatever. But that should have been what they'd done. They should have gone to a established platform that does experimental content like FX and done it that way. Because like you said, this $200,000 studio, you said?
Yeah, a month.
A month. This $200,000 studio, a month that they were going in there, this whole staffing issue that they had, dude, just a fixed camera, people sitting on a couch. They had most of it figured out with what they were doing with Frosk on the couch. That's all they had to do. And then team up with somebody who actually had a platform. Going out there and trying to build from the ground up with that kind of budget, you're done.
Yeah.
It just does not work like that.
Hey, you talk about building a platform. What were we just talking about? These streaming services, how they're all losing money. It's like, I don't know why you guys relied on YouTube and Twitch to build your platform. I mean, you guys are owned by Comcast. They have a little streaming service called Peacock. Why couldn't you have started something there? Like, if you needed like a viewing platform, it's like you already have how many built-in subscribers to Peacock, mostly because of the Comcast cable service. It's like you could have started something there on a smaller scale and built it up into something bigger, where you could have branched out to YouTube or to other things, but use that as kind of like your base. But I don't think anyone really truly knew what they were doing, and apparently the guy who was behind all this was dating Olivia Munn at the time, and I guess,
course,
and then of course, like I said, this is allegedly here. I can't say for certain, but I guess they thought that by reviving G4, we were going to use Olivia Munn as kind of the face of this revival. Because let's be honest, Olivia Munn kind of torpedoed her career in Hollywood a few years ago after the whole debacle with the Predator movie, where she outed a guy for being a sexual pedophile right before the movie started. Now, usually you don't make that revelation as the movie is coming out, because that's what we call bad press, and the studios have not forgiven her for that. So it's like, hey, you want to resurrect your career? Let's remake G4. And then by the time they actually put G4 on the air, they had broken up. So, oops.
But before what was that?
Oh, just real quick to answer Darius' question. He says that now Comcast destroyed Tech TV. They really did. I mean, a lot of people have talked about this before too, because keep in mind, when Tech TV was based in San Francisco and G4 at the time was based in Los Angeles, when they essentially bought Tech TV, they took in all the staff who were in San Francisco, made them move to LA to be a part of the G4 crew, and then literally 8 months later fired them all. So imagine moving your entire life from one city to another only to be fired because the network never had any real intention on doing anything with you to begin with.
Yep. But with all this bad news, here's a little good news, okay? This might be a little risky for people, but consider going over to Kickstarter and showing and looking at the film and video section. There are indie funded movies here. They're not doing very great on funding, as you can see, but maybe they're just a little bit too out there, So I don't know. Chuck Dixon talked about this about 2, 3, 4 months ago, that Hollywood is going to be switching to action and horror. And those are pretty easy genres to make. They're pretty easy
because
to
they're
do.
cheap.
Well, yeah, exactly. And they get a thrill out of an audience very quickly. So and it doesn't have to be plot heavy or anything. Guy with a chainsaw goes on a rampage for justice or for evil. That's the decider. That's really all it is. So consider going over to Kickstarter and checking out what they're doing for independent films. Maybe you want to make your own and you need some funding. Go ahead over here to Kickstarter. On our end, I will talk to Spencer and the upper head at Bounding about getting eyes on these indie films so that you know what's out there, that there is an alternative to Hollywood. There is an alternative to these weirdos out there that are trying to get you to do stuff to your body, trying to get you to do stuff against God, all this crazy stuff. There are people putting out solid content. Maybe it doesn't exist on this platform at the moment, but Kickstarter gets over 16.8 million individual clicks a month. So consider making your own indie film, keeping the budget light and the lead hot.
Yeah, and look, this is where we're making a shift here in media. Where I told people this for a long time now. If you're expecting Disney to get its act together, if you're expecting Warner Brothers to turn it around, you're probably gonna hold your breath until you suffocate. At this point, you have to start looking for the entertainment that really inspires you, that actually motivates you to want to invest it in, and make you want to back it. And there's a lot of indie creators out there who are trying to put out good stuff. They don't exactly have the backing, the framing, and they need some help. And maybe these are people who we need to create the next wave of entertainment. And maybe there's just somebody out there who just needs that little bit of a push, because there are still passionate people out there who want to create good things. They're just not being hired by these corporations because of whatever DEI, personal vendetta reasons they're putting out there. They're not trying to put these guys over. But like I said, the next wave of good entertainment is not going to come from a corporation at this point. They've made their bed, they're going to lie in it, and they're going to go down with the ship. So it's up to you guys to find the next wave out there of good content creators, and they are out there. You just got to find them. So it requires a little bit more work, but I mean, hey, how bad do you want it?
Right, exactly. And with that, we'll close out this Monday Rewind. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to hit like and subscribe and slap that bell. We'll be back on Wednesday for 01 and Thursday for Sky Talker with Stephen Kent. We hope you have a good night. And again, thanks for tuning in.
Hey.